All right, everyone. So over the weekend, I just decided, I've been having so much fun doing the rewatches of some of these CW shows. Instead of waiting until the proper time to watch certain episodes, I actually went ahead and just jumped to Elseworlds and Crisis on Infinite Earths. Like I watched both of those crossover events back to back. Now, Crisis is not my favorite crossover, but it is a good one. Elseworlds is not my favorite crossover, but I think that was the crossover I had the most fun watching. And I think Elseworlds holds a special place in the crossover lineup for me because for once they didn't try to do too much. And by that I mean they didn't make it like a 5 night event or a 4 night event. It was what, 3 episodes, Supergirl, Flash, and Arrow, and that's all they needed to do. They didn't have to shoehorn in an extra episode for Legends. I think this was at the point where Legends was kind of, treated like the bastard child at this point. It's like sometimes, a crossover might have a legend or two, but Legends was pretty much self-contained into its own, reality. I think Crisis on Earth, I think Crisis on Earth X was like the last crossover that the Legends really took participation in, because heck, even with Crisis on Infinite Earths, Sarah, Ray, and Rory Heatwave participated, and that was it. So yeah, Elseworlds was obviously the setup, because I remember when Elseworlds first came on, way back in like 2018, I believe. And the end stinger after they showed Psycho Pirate was Crisis on Infinite Earths coming in 2019. I'm like, oh man, no, what's that? Coming in 2019, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Whoa, what a time to be an Arrowverse fan. We were eating well, because what if I remember the year's lineup right? You had Infinity War, which dropped in 2018, one of, if not my favorite MCU film. And then the following year, you had Endgame and Crisis. And I ain't gonna hold you. I remember 2019, after watching both Endgame and Crisis, I think in some respects, Crisis was better than Avengers Endgame. I know that's a bold statement to make, but it truly felt that in some ways, Endgame wasn't as good as Crisis. Now, to me personally, Avengers, and look, I'm not trying to crap on the movie, and I'm not trying to disregard the box office numbers and all the records it set, and I appreciate it for what it was. It was kind of like, the closing chapter on the first 3 phases of the MCU, but it just felt like a glorified clip show where everybody went back through time to various events in the MCU. And I don't think Endgame, to me, it had a lot of great. Endgame falls into the same category as like Iron Man 2 or Avengers Age of Ultron. As a whole, it is not a great movie, but it is chock full of great scenes. Like, scenes where it's like, I don't know if I'd go out of my way to watch the entire movie from start to finish, but I will watch a heck of a lot of various clips. Oh, Cap picking up Thor's hammer, or, seeing Cap fight the 2012 version of himself, Iron Man snapping the Infinity Gauntlet, and so on and so forth. And Endgame doesn't even make my top 5 MCU films. It doesn't. And it pales in comparison to Infinity War. I think one of the most damning things is that the Thanos, what was it? Was it 2014 Thanos? I believe. Basically, it was the Thanos of that particular year, pre-Infinity War, that fought in the final battle, and it wasn't the Thanos from, in the actual Infinity War. So it just really didn't hit the same. Plus, despite the outcome of the fight, it just seemed too easy to beat Thanos, considering you had Scarlet Witch, Captain Marvel. You had nearly half a dozen characters on the field who bodied Thanos alone until, various things happened. Oh, Captain Marvel got punched with the Power Stone, or, Thanos said rain fire on the battlefield to stop Scarlet Witch from ripping him to shreds. So, yeah, it just didn't have that same impact as Thanos from Infinity War, who just like, he was a tank. But in any case, I think when you compare Crisis and the MCU, both of them were great in their respective genres or avenues. The Endgame being the closing chapter on the MCU up to that point, where if the MCU ended on Endgame, that would have been fantastic. But of course, we know it kept going, and yeah, aside from maybe 2 to 3 projects, the quality just isn't what it was pre-Endgame in terms of content. When it comes to Crisis, I think that it did a great job of taking almost everything from, the Arrowverse up until that point, and then putting it all together to make for this, fantastic 5-night, crossover event. However, I will say that Crisis on Infinite Earths is a bit disappointing due to the fact that it set up a lot. It set up a lot of things that unfortunately never got a good payoff for, because, Crisis happened, and unfortunately, not long after, a real world crisis happened with Rona shutting a lot of things down, especially the industry, of course. But keep in mind, and I took some notes when I was watching Crisis, because granted, I haven't watched Crisis in a few years. There were a lot of things set up that just didn't happen in the long run. And also, Crisis on Infinite Earths felt like Infinity War to an extent, because when you think of Avengers Infinity War, there's a lot of cameos, but really Infinity War felt like all the various pieces of the MCU were coming together. The Guardians, Thor, after what happened to him in Ragnarok, the Avengers on Earth, Doctor Strange, this, that, and the third, everything came together. Crisis on Infinite Earth, the actual comic book, the show did a good job when kind of mirroring what happened with that. Crisis was nothing but a cameo fest. If you read the actual comic, it's just a bunch of random characters coming together for this just insane event that could destroy all of reality. And when it comes to the actual Arrowverse show, it's kind of funny because even though I love me some Black Lightning, especially the earlier season. Well, I think the first couple seasons were the best. They got the last season, you could tell it was just one of those things where the CW was kind of done with it, so the story and budget really wasn't there. But yeah, that final fight between Tobias and Jefferson, that was so bad. Okay, but in any case, Black Lightning showed up, and there was absolutely no reason for him to show up, because I remember he just appeared out of nowhere. It's like, what happened to my family? Ah! But no, Pariah brought him there to zap the power from the treadmill thing that 90s Flash got knocked off of to stop the antimatter wave. But yeah, so looking at Crisis, you had that great moment at the end of the crossover where in the pseudo Hall of Justice, Barry had a table set up where, all the chairs had the symbols of the different heroes. You had Superman, Supergirl, Martian Manhunter, White Canary, Batwoman, Flash, Black Lightning, I believe, was there too. And there was an honorary seat for, Green Arrow. So I think there was 7 seats total with 6 characters actually there. And it made it seem like, yeah, whenever something goes down, we can meet here and come up with a plan. And I think one of the most hilarious things was the Monitor telling Kate Kane that she was the Bat of the future. So let's talk about what happened post-Crisis, because one of the biggest things was all the Earths merged together. Like Supergirl, she was now on the same Earth as Arrow, Flash. Black Lightning, I believe prior to Crisis, yeah, he had his own Earth. He was in Freeland now, but on the same Earth as everyone else. Everybody was in close proximity. However, after the crossover, things just fell apart. I mean, you had Supergirl, which lasted, I think, 1 more season, and then that was over. Which sucked because Central City and, I forgot the name of the city that Supergirl takes place in. Capital City? I forgot. Basically, they were in close proximity to each other, but it doesn't matter because guess what? Supergirl, ended. I use the word ended and cancel interchangeably, but just know that the show came to a close. And maybe if you were lucky, one or two characters from a canceled or ended show would pop up in the Flash at some point. Then Batwoman, what's her name? Ruby Rose, she quit after the first season. I think for a number of reasons. One being that she suffered, major injury during filming, and something else was going on. I guess she didn't like how the show was being, produced and whatnot. But behind the scenes conflict, I guess is the best way to put it. She left, so Kate Kane was no longer Batwoman. So much for the Bat of the future. Black Lightning, if I'm not mistaken, I forgot what season of the show Black Lightning was in during this crossover. I think it was like in season 2 or 3. But regardless, Jefferson showed up. Black Lightning showed up in Flash, I think, during the Armageddon crossover. But that was it. And then in one episode of Black Lightning, I think when Jennifer turned into molecules or something, and they were trying to restore her, Flash raced over with a piece of equipment to help with the machine, but this wasn't even shown on screen. It's like Jefferson said, "Yeah, I know a guy," and then during the commercial break, I guess Flash came over, gave the device, and then that was it. And I'm like, wow. Again, it comes down to budget. Arrow was ending. It was in its final season during Crisis, and one of the biggest things during the crossover was setting up Mia for, I forgot the name of the show. What was it called? Arrow and the Canaries or something? Almost like a Birds of Prey-like series where it would have been Mia and Black Canary, or I think it was 2 Black Canaries. But either way, the entire season of the final season of Arrow was a mix between Oliver traveling Earths to get stuff for Crisis and setting up Mia and the spinoff. Yet the spinoff never got greenlit. Legends, I think, had another season or 2, and then that ended. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, yeah, Black Lightning just stayed on its own, even though it was on the same Earth. Supergirl ended soon. Batwoman, well, Kate Kane left. And then, the new Batwoman eventually came in the final season of Flash for that god-awful Red Death crossover. Legends stayed its own thing, and Arrow was ending. So all these setups really amounted to nothing, which was really sad because Crisis had so much potential. I mean, if you look at Crisis for what it was and not think about what happens following Crisis, it still stands up well. I mean, you had Tom Welling show up again. You had Brandon Routh as Kingdom Come Superman. You had John Wesley Shipp reprise his role as the 90s Flash from the live action series, which he actually did that in Elseworlds too. I forgot the guy's name. Was it something? No. John Cryer? I believe he played Lex Luthor in the Supergirl series. I loved his portrayal of Lex Luthor. The Monitor, I like the character. And of course, the Anti-Monitor looked like a pale Thanos, which I thought was funny, but it's accurate. I love the return of Vibe because I always thought it was so stupid how Cisco gave up his powers in the series. So to have Vibe back in action for a little while was great. I will say another reason that I actually have to admit, I fast forwarded through all the scenes of Barry and Iris, and this isn't meant to be an Iris hate video. It's just that when you look at the Flash season 6, I think that was the season of the Flash that took place during Crisis. Kind of like with Arrow, at the end of the it was season 6 because Nora disappeared at the end of season 5 because she didn't want to go into the negative Speed Force. Then the first episode of season 6, the episode ended with Barry and Iris looking at like a video message that Nora had left them, but then the video got erased when the Monitor showed up. So basically, just like with Arrow, the beginning episodes of the Flash season 6 led into Crisis, like Barry dealing with the fact that, okay, the newspaper article from season 1 said, I disappear in a crisis, red skies, so I need to figure out things before I disappear. Making Cisco team leader, which should have been the case after Barry went into the Speed Force at the end of season 3. For the life of me, I have no idea how Iris was team leader in season 4, but whatever. Then Ralph was being set up to be the hero of Central City after Flash disappears, which is sad because not long after Ralph Dibny got written out of the show because his actor had some tweets from years ago resurfaced. I don't know. It's just some bull. Look, I don't even know exactly what the tweet said, so I can't really speak on, I wasn't offended by it because I don't know what the tweets were pertaining to. But I was mad because at that point in The Flash, Ralph Dibny was my favorite character. Because everyone else was written to be so stiff and annoyed by him. And it just disgusted me how Team Flash operated at that point. Ralph would have a thought. He would get completely dismissed. And he would be right about something. But then it wouldn't be until shit hits the fan that everybody's like, oh, such and such. And I say such and such equals whatever Ralph said that he got dismissed for. Once it's said by someone else, all of a sudden, yeah, that's a good idea. And it's so ridiculous. Don't make me do a season 4 video about The Thinker because I have so many thoughts on that, man. Team Flash at that point was trash. Everybody talked about season 5 being the decline with Nora showing up and throwing everything out of whack. But I think that season 4 was definitely the beginning of the end of the foundation of Team Flash and what they stood for. But, yeah, Ralph being set up, as the big hero of Central City, that went to crap. Not just because the Flash survived Crisis, but because he was eventually written out of the series. But yeah, when it comes to Iris and Barry, every episode leading up to Crisis, they always had that one moment where it's like, I'm going to disappear, right? Well, hey, our love is stronger than ever. They would just have those talks out in the hallway or in their loft or whatever. And it's just like the same thing being repeated over and over again. So when Iris was in, I think she was only in a couple of episodes of the crossover on the Wave Rider with Barry. It was just the same old. They'd be in the hallway just talking and caressing each other. It's like, I don't want to do this, right? But I have to. It's in order to save reality. Yeah, don't worry about it. Then they kiss. I just skipped all that because it was the same thing over and over again. Hey, West Allen fans, there was a lot on your plate for you to sop up because West Allen fans love that kind of sappy stuff. For me, it was just too repetitive. Also, Kevin Conroy, seeing him portray live action Bruce Wayne was awesome, but the way he was depicted, I did not like it. People talk about how Harley Quinn and the Suicide Squad taking him down and killing him in the Suicide Squad game was awful. I think this predates that in terms of a very bad portrayal of the Kevin Conroy Batman. And the way he died was just so stupid. I mean, for him to be in that mechanical suit from Kingdom Come and then get killed because he fell on a generator that had open, electrical wires and stuff. That just felt so unlike Bruce Wayne to have a setup like that in the Batcave. And then for him to get didn't he get pushed or kicked by Kate Kane? It was so dumb. It really was. It's like, oh, we need to kill off this Batman in order to make Kate Kane realize she's the Bat of the future. Man. And even worse was in episode 3 of the crossover where Kara, and look, I get it. There was a lot of stuff going down, people's full realities being wiped out of existence. So not everyone is going to be thinking rationally. But for Kara to want to use the Book of Destiny to rewrite things so her world comes back was stupid because of the fact that nobody said, hey, Kara, I know you want to use the book to bring back everyone you lost. I get it. But it does not make sense to try to use the book before we stop the antimatter wave. The antimatter wave. Because if you bring everything back, number one, you might die. Or at the very least, you will lose your mind. You will become insane. So don't you think it's best to figure out how to stop that wave instead of you risking everything to bring them back only for them to get wiped out again? And then they had that thing where Kate would constantly look at the piece of kryptonite she swapped off the evil Batman before he got killed off, like she was going to use it on Kara to stop her from using the book. It was just so dumb. Also, what was dumb was Oliver's choice to sacrifice himself in order to save as many people from Supergirl's world as possible at the end of the first night of the crossover, considering the fact that he knew he was supposed to play a pivotal role in saving all of reality. Look, I get it. It's not easy for these heroes to be like, saving the majority over the few isn't something I like to choose. Basically the trolley problem of, hey, saving this one person isn't worth letting thousands, if not millions of people die. But in this case, we're talking about, infinite number of people. It's like, look, where are these people going to go? I think that it was stated a few billion or a couple billion of people were managed to leave the Earth Supergirls from and make it to Earth 1. But at the end of the day, it didn't matter because guess what? Earth 1 got vaporized. So Oliver died fighting those shadow demon things. And if I remember correctly, he actually dies technically twice. I count it as 3. So he died fighting those shadow demon things. He was brought back via a Lazarus pit. Well, his body was almost like in a animalistic state or a primitive mind state. He was just like a wild animal. His soul needed to be retrieved from purgatory, but before John Constantine, Diggle, and Mia could do it, what's his name? Joe? I forgot his name. Not Joe West, but Joe Corner. The guy that was the Spectre. He turns Oliver into the Spectre. So before Oliver's soul could be retrieved, he was trained to become the Spectre. And then he actually died again at the end of part 4 when he defeated the Anti-Monitor to create the new universe. So his body was destroyed once the Antimatter Wave destroyed the Wave Rider. So you could debate whether or not you count the Lazarus Pit Oliver as another death, but I kind of do, kind of don't. So he died 2 or 3 times. Now, speaking of the shadow demons, I get it. There were thousands of these creatures, but they could be taken out what seemed to be pretty easily. They were, built up to be a major threat in part 1. You have Supergirl, Superman fighting them off. You got Flash and Arrow and Batwoman and Adam fighting them off as best they could. Like, even Adam took one of the batarangs and charged it with some sort of energy, which allowed it to be tossed and take out a bunch of those things at once. So it was shown to take a lot of effort to defeat these creatures. And Oliver died doing so. Then we get to part 4, where Ryan Troy, just a regular scientist, is labeled as one of the Paragons. So during the final fight, or the next to final fight, when the Paragons are fighting off the Shadow Demons and Spectre is going up against the Anti-Monitor, how in the world does Ryan Troy, without any powers, any martial arts training, he's just punching these demons and they're disappearing? And it's like, Oliver died going up against these people, or these creatures, yet Ryan Troy is able to just fend them off with ease. Make it make sense. And even worse, even though Oliver died, they really dropped the ball by having the Anti-Monitor come up in the final episode. I mean, it was a Legends episode, so the giant Bebo was hilarious because, well, it's Legends, but it really undermined Oliver's sacrifice for the Anti-Monitor to return again in the final episode. And he was beaten pretty well. He technically wasn't even defeated. He was just put into like an infinite loop of shrinking into the Atomverse or whatever, the microverse. Yeah, so Crisis was really weird, folks. I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong. It was great. But when you really take the time to think about the way things set up in the actual crossover and then the lack of payoffs, it is kind of bad. But it was a major accomplishment for, a television series like the Arrowverse, so I will give it props for that. But how do you think it stacks up compared to the other Arrowverse crossovers? Do you think Crisis is as good or even better than Avengers Endgame? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. But with that being said, like and subscribe, and let me know if you want me to do any more Arrowverse or superhero content right here on the channel.